Eliza Tidewell preferred the company of butter and flour to that of people. At Dawn Rise Bakery, a sun-washed cottage perched on Gull's Point, where gulls cried and fishing boats bobbed, she arrived before sunrise each day, slipping through the blue door in silence. By 7 o'clock, the shop windows glowed gold, and locals filed in, lured by the perfume of brown sugar and sea salt drifting through the lane. Eliza's hands were sure even when her voice wavered, and the townsfolk of Cape Haven respected her quiet genius. They especially revered her late grandmother's harvest scone, a flaky, honey-kissed round studded with dried crabapple, orange peel, and a whisper of rosemary. Every October, one batch was auctioned at the harvest fair to raise money for the Lighthouse Fund. The recipe, scrawled in Grandma Tidewell's curling script, stayed locked in a tin at the back of Eliza's pantry until the morning it vanished. The fairgrounds hummed with anticipation when Eliza arrived to set up her stall. Autumn banners rippled in the salt wind, fiddles warmed up near the cider tent. Normally she would unpack trays of shortbread and cinnamon knots, saving the scones for the noon auction. Today her fingers trembled as she unlatched the delivery crate. No scones. Only an empty linen, folded as neat as a pressed leaf. She darted to her notebook, where she always tucked the recipe card as talisman, but the last page gaped blank. Someone had stolen both product and secret overnight. Eliza's heart pounded loud enough to drown the distant surf. The Lighthouse Fund depended on that auction. More selfishly, the harvest scone was the one language in which she spoke boldly. Without it, she felt mute. A hand landed gently on her shoulder. "Everything all right, love?" asked Ruby Cobb, owner of the neighbouring tea-house booth. Ruby's flowered kerchief fluttered under her chin as she eyed Eliza's empty trays. Eliza swallowed. "Problem with a delivery, that's all." She forced a fragile smile. Shyness clamped her tongue before she could confess the truth. Ruby squeezed her arm. "If you need anything, ginger cookies, spare kettle, holler." Then she bustled off, leaving Eliza staring at the restless tide. She needed to find that recipe before noon. Fortunately, bakers learned to read trails. A dusting of flour on a tabletop, a smudge of jam on an apron. Sleuthing couldn't be too different from following crumbs. Her first stop was the judge's pavilion, where 3 potential suspects polished silver cutlery. Mayor Langley, broad as a barrel and fragrant with pipe smoke, greeted her with raised brows. "Chef Tidewell, expecting you for the scone drop-off. Everything shipshape?" Eliza managed a nod, scanning the table. A platter labelled Harvest Scone, reserved, weighted, empty and gleaming. No telling fingerprints on its surface. "One question, Mayor," she squeaked. "Who has access to the storage shed overnight?" "Only me and Greer the groundskeeper," he replied. "Keys locked in my coat pocket." He patted his tweed lapel. "Why?" "No reason," she murmured, retreating before the mayor's curiosity grew sharper. Next, she checked the storage shed itself, an old boathouse behind the carousel. Inside, flour sacks leaned like sleepy sailors. Burlap absorbed the tang of brine. The iron padlock hung intact. Yet on the dusty floor she spotted a pattern. Faint half-moons, as if someone had knelt with knees pressed into sawdust. At the doorway, a single strand of calico thread clung to a splinter. Calico? Ruby's kerchief? Or perhaps Nellie Sharp, the antiques dealer who always wore patchwork skirts. Eliza pocketed the thread and stepped back into sunlight, colliding with Basil Crane, Cape Haven's celebrity food blogger. Clad in a tailored pea coat, Basil flashed a toothy grin. "Chef Tidewell, Heard the buzz about your scones. I've a mind to photograph them for my column. Small town bakes that wow. Her cheeks flared. They're not ready yet. I can wait. Secrets take time, yes? He adjusted his camera strap, the lens swinging like a hungry eye. Eliza couldn't shake the feeling the lens lingered on her tin recipe box when he'd visited the bakery last week. Had Basil's curiosity turned criminal? She pushed past politely and hurried back to Dawnrise for clue hunting. The bakery felt different. Perhaps it was only the guilty air of trespass, but Eliza noticed the back window latch sat unhooked. A dusting of flour decorated the sill, fresh because she'd scrubbed it spotless Friday evening. Footsteps, too, pressed into the boards, floury ovals larger than her own feet, pointing from window to pantry. Inside the pantry, ingredients stood perfectly in place, too perfectly. Whoever broke in had known precisely what they wanted, disturbing nothing except the tin. Eliza ran her finger along the shelf and found a gap where the tin had rested. She thought of Grandma's voice. "Child, every bake tells a story. Listen." She listened to the single squeak of the floorboard under the shelf. A floorboard Basil had commented on when he'd interviewed her, noting, "Charming character, these little floors." He was tall enough to see the tin, unlike younger kitchen helper Ollie, who barely reached the second shelf. But motive. Basil benefited by scoops and scandals. A stolen recipe might be irresistible clickbait. Eliza returned to the fair with a plan that terrified her. Speak to people. She'd never interrogated anyone in her life, but the scone clock ticked. She found Ollie Miller loading pumpkins at the pie contest rink. Purple flour smudged his nose, a signature from berry turnovers he adored. She crouched beside him. "Ollie, did you lock up last night after prep?" His freckles puckered. "Yes, Miss Tidewell. Checked windows, too." "The back," she pressed. He hesitated. "Well, Ruby came by with honey samples. Door chimed while we chatted. Maybe someone slipped in." Ruby again. The calico thread burned Eliza's pocket. Only one place sold that fabric, Aunt Pearl's dry goods. Eliza marched there next. Aunt Pearl, rounding price tags on knitted scarves, welcomed her with a sugary morning. "Did Ruby buy new kerchief fabric recently?" Eliza asked, surprising herself with directness. "Yesterday, half-yard of Seaside blossom calico," Pearl chirped. "Said she'd sew headbands for the tea dance." So Ruby had fresh scraps that matched the shed thread. Yet Ruby was also Eliza's friend. Could she betray trust? Eliza needed clearer evidence. Remembering the knee prints in sawdust, she envisioned Ruby kneeling to lift crates, plausible. But Basil, tall, tidy, would not kneel, he'd stoop. And Ollie? He might plunk both knees. She rubbed her temples, flower trails, fabric threads, crumbs scattered by design or accident. She wished for cinnamon's certainty, butter's honesty. Noon crept closer. Crowds swelled, asking after the scone. Eliza distracted them with maple buns, but murmurs spread like yeast in warm dough. "Where's the famous Tidewell scone?" The lighthouse committee eyed her stall with worry. Pressure rose until she almost considered confessing failure. Instead, she ducked behind a van of apple barrels and inhaled briny air, forcing herself to calm. Think like yeast, patient, persistent. She listed facts. 1. The recipe vanished from bakery after closing. 2. Intruder entered through window. 3. Footprints large, tin shelf squeaked. 4. Intruder knew the tin's importance. 5. Shed visit later, knee prints and calico thread. 2 visits, 1 theft at bakery, later move of scones to shed. But the scones themselves had never been baked, so why the shed? Unless the thief planned to swap her batch with their own inferior version, ruining her reputation while cashing in. If so, scones might be baking elsewhere right now. Who owned an oven close by? Ruby's teacup cottage had one. Basil boarded at the Seafarer Inn. No kitchen. Ollie lived with his aunt above the post office. Small oven, yes, but limited privacy. Eliza dashed to Ruby's cottage, heart galloping. Sweet steam seeped from the chimney. She knocked. Ruby opened, cheeks flour-dusted. Heavens, everything okay? Eliza's nose caught notes of honey, orange, rosemary, her recipe's perfume. "I'm sorry," Ruby blurted before Eliza spoke. "You weren't at the bakery when I stopped with tea cakes. I saw your tin on the shelf and thought, what if something happens to it during the hectic fair? So I tucked it in my bag for safekeeping. I planned to return it this morning, but you'd already left." She produced the tin like a contrite student. "When I realized, I decided to bake a batch, save you time." Eliza's pulse slowed, but suspicion lingered. "Why the shed? I found calico there." Ruby blinked. "Oh, I stored extra folding tables last night. Probably snagged my kerchief." Ruby's face radiated honesty, yet Eliza's stomach tightened. "Ruby, if you have the recipe, then why weren't the scones at my booth?" "I needed to chill the dough first." She pointed to a tray in the fridge. "I swear, darling, I meant to help, not harm." Eliza opened the tin. The card sat inside, but another sheet had been added. Photocopies. Basil's hotel logo faint on the corner. A cold shiver crawled over her skin. "Ruby, who's been here since morning?" "Just Basil. Wanted lifestyle shots of me working the whisk." She clucked. "He's due back any minute." Eliza thanked her, promising to return for the dough, then hurried toward the Seafarer Inn. On the boardwalk, she met Basil striding with camera bag and coffee. "Chef," he called. "Any progress?" Eliza stood squarely. "I know you copied my grandmother's recipe." His eyebrows lifted innocently. "Copy? I wouldn't dream—" She opened the tin, revealing the copier's watermark. "Your hotel's business center prints with light blue lines. Recognize them?" Basil's smooth veneer cracked. He glanced around, lowered his voice. "Fine, I scanned it. Purely archival. Recipes are cultural artifacts. I intended to publish a tribute." "Without asking?" Eliza's voice grew steadier. "Did you also steal it?" Basil exhaled. "No. Ruby handed it to me, said you'd loaned it for my article. She even let me photograph her mixing dough. I thought you'd approved." Eliza stared. "So Ruby gave you the card?" He nodded. "She said you'd be thrilled. I returned it 2 hours ago." Eliza's mind whipped between relief and fresh worry. If Basil wasn't the original thief, then Ruby's intentions might not be benign after all. Or perhaps someone else still lurked. She resumed her trek toward the fair to confront Ruby fully, but was intercepted by Greer the groundskeeper, clutching his knee. "Miss Tidewell, Mayor sent me to fetch the scones. Auction's in 20 minutes." Eliza promised delivery and hurried on. At Ruby's cottage, the tray of dough was gone. Ruby herself, too. Panic flared. She raced back to the storage shed, burst inside, and there Ruby knelt by a portable camp stove, sliding a sheet of golden scones onto a rack. "Ruby," Eliza cried, "the auction's starting. Why are you baking here?" Ruby jumped, dropping a potholder. "Because I can't let you down, love. Your oven at the bakery gave me trouble when I tried. Flame kept sputtering. This was plan B." "Why not tell me?" Eliza's voice cracked. "You looked terrified this morning. I thought I'd solve it quietly. I know you hate fuss." "Fuss, indeed." Eliza's eyes burned with sudden tears, of relief, frustration, gratitude. She inhaled honey rosemary steam and read the scene. Ruby's calico-fringed kerchief lay on a crate, matching the thread. Knee prints explained. She was caretaker, not culprit. But the puzzle pieces still misaligned. The recipe disappeared before Ruby visited the bakery. Unless Eliza remembered Ollie mentioning Ruby stopped by during their chat, and she'd left the door ajar. Yet that might simply have enabled a different intruder. Eliza knelt beside Ruby. "Did you leave my door unlatched yesterday?" Ruby nodded sheepishly. "Sorry, I was juggling a tea tray." So window, not door, remained prime entry, and footprints large. Greer the groundskeeper? He had shed keys and big boots. She thanked Ruby and carried the cooling rack toward the pavilion. As she crossed the grassy lane, she noticed Greer outside the judge's tent, wiping his hands with nervous vigor. A smear of orange glaze streaked his sleeve, the very hue of dried crabapple morsels. Her heartbeat quickened. She approached softly. "Greer, everything okay?" He startled, shoving something into his pocket. Just making rounds." "Stain on your cuff," she pointed. "Looks like scone dough." His cheeks reddened above his beard. "Stopped by your booth earlier." "But I baked nothing there," he stammered. Eliza glimpsed a folded parchment protruding from his pocket. The original recipe card? She steadied her voice. "Mind if I see what you have?" Greer's shoulders slumped. He produced the card. "Didn't mean harm, Miss Tidewell. I only wanted to help my wife. She's been laid off from the cannery. Thought if she could bake your scones for the cafe in Rockbury, we'd have income." Pain pricked Eliza's chest. Greer, gentle giant who maintained the lighthouse path, risking reputation for love. But theft was theft. "Greer," she said softly, "my grandmother gifted that recipe to the town, not to me alone. If you'd asked, we might have arranged something. Stealing damages trust." She reclaimed the card. He nodded, eyes shining. "I'm so sorry." She glanced at the pavilion where auctioneer's gavel hammered for attention. Crowds buzzed, wallets opened. The lighthouse needed paint, Greer needed work, the town needed scones. A solution bubbled in her mind like rising dough. "Come with me," she said, and marched him to the stage where Mayor Langley tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gents, slight delay," she announced, voice amplified. Heads turned, her shyness melted in the heat of purpose. "The harvest scone is here, hot and fragrant, thanks to many hands, my dear neighbor Ruby, and Greer, whose devotion to this town keeps the fairgrounds beautiful. In the spirit of harvest, we are sharing not only the scone, but the recipe itself. After today, it will be published in the Cape Haven Chronicle, free for every kitchen." Gasps, then applause swelled like surf. Eliza continued, "However, Dawnrise Bakery will partner with Greer and his wife to produce official lighthouse scones year-round. A portion of proceeds will fund repairs, so every bite keeps our beacon shining." Mayor Langley beamed, slapping Greer's back. Ruby whooped, waving her kerchief. Basil lifted his camera, capturing the scene for coastal hearts everywhere. When the auction resumed, the single pan of scones fetched a record price. Later, Eliza stood outside the bakery sipping cider as dusk painted the harbour lilac. The recipe tin rested in her hands, now holding only a copy, because the original would be framed at the Lighthouse Museum. Basil approached, contrite. "Hope your speech didn't ruin my scoop," he said. "It improved it," Eliza smiled. "You can write about a community that rose like bread." He laughed softly. "Best headline I could hope for." Ruby joined them, passing warm buns. "To the shy sleuth of Cape Haven," she toasted. Eliza blushed, but no longer hid. She had faced flower trails, fabric clues, and thumping nerves, only to learn that secrets foment isolation, while sharing feeds everyone. As gulls settled on weathered pilings and lanterns flickered in bakery windows, she felt the deep, comforting certainty of Cinnamon's truth and Honey's grace. The brightest light, like the lighthouse beam, tasted sweetest when spread wide across a hungry sea.